I think a lot of people go through life and they are not conscious of the reputation they're building.
Trust is the biggest part of reputation.
And with most things in life, we don't become aware of something until maybe there's a cost.
It takes years to build, and it can take 5 minutes to just fuck up.
Everything has like an equal and opposite reaction. And it's inspiring to develop yourself and your reputation. It takes forever to build. And a couple really terrible decisions to just.
I'm sure it will work.
And now, give me your definition of reputation and the purpose of why somebody should care about theirs.
Reputation is the perception that other people have of you, and perception is reality. Whether you like it or not, it's reality. And in the world, I think the easiest way to look at it is this word that's used so loosely, but branding, like how people perceive you and what you stand for. Why is it important? It takes years to build, and it can take 5 minutes to just fuck up. And we live in a world where cancel culture is not exactly fully a thing anymore. Like, you can't really cancel anybody. Equally, like, it does definitely 100% influence what people are or are not willing to put up with, believe in, connect with, communicate, tolerate, etc. And when you do not take the time to understand and think about it through the lens of what is this going to look like in 10, 20, 30, 40 years, it can be a motherfucker. Excuse my French. So, yeah, it's something you need to be conscious of. And I understand that sometimes it sounds very airy-fairy when people are like, branding, I'm a branding expert. It's like, yes, it's important. And I think the airy-fairy stuff is not cool because it's kind of stupid in my opinion. I do think it's important to look at how you want to represent yourself in detail and get so clear on it and then map what that actually looks like. Because if you don't, you will make decisions and you're like, well, that's not what I intended for. And it's like, you didn't understand the downstream consequences of your own behaviors. So
I think for anybody listening to this, it's really easy when we hear terms, branding, reputation, you think of business. You think of maybe being a business owner or more in like a high level career. Reputation applies regardless of what your career is, what level, what position, what you're doing, because there's people in your life that interact with you regardless of what you do, that have a perception of you and have a set of beliefs based on how you show up. So this entire conversation isn't just geared towards if you're a business owner or you're in maybe like a higher level position. It's like, how do you treat people out in public? What is your reputation in your community, in your workplace, in your relationship, in your family? When people think about you, what do they associate you with? And are you okay with that? And you're consciously building it and designing your life that way. And you're like, I'm okay with this and how I show up. Or is there areas that maybe you would like to improve and work towards? I think it's a conversation of like both and.
I think one of my favorite things is in the woo-woo spiritual community of online coaches and life coaches and shit. It's funny. They're like all non-married, single, degenerate people who want you to take their relationship perspective, but that's a different story. The thing they often say is like, I'm not responsible for how you feel. And while I do not think I am responsible for how you feel to a degree, particularly when I'm aware that what it can create, if I'm not willing to have a conversation around my awareness on what emotions it will create by being in my stance, that's a problem. And I think that's something that people, and that's a reputational thing, right? Where it's like, you can have your strong stances, and if you are unwilling to have discussion around your stances and people don't like it, that is a problem. That is an indicator that you are more rooted in trying to be right or have your way than you are in collaborative opportunity to understand. I think a lot of people miss that in reputation. And it's not, look, if I say something and you feel a certain way about it and I'm unaware of your past, for example, and you get triggered, it's not my fault that you got triggered. However, if you want to have a discussion after the fact and I don't want to have a discussion about it and I'm not willing to do it in a civilized manner, that's on me. So if you're upset and then I'm not interested in having the conversation when you are a willing participant, that is an indicator that I think higher of myself than I actually am. And I think that's something about reputation. Like, perception is reality. You can stand strong and tall in what you believe in and be willing to be an intellectually curious and open person to still have the discussion about, hey, I might believe something and feel a certain way to that you might feel a certain way about because you don't have all of the context on what I said. Yet if we take the time to have a conversation, we can probably find some sort of common ground. I find a lot of people when they say, oh, I'm not responsible for how you feel, it's also an indicator to me that you're not interested in having genuine conversation and connection with someone about what they're experiencing.
I think for a lot of people, just that sentence, and it's kind of like a little bit of a sidebar, I think at times people care very recklessly about how other people feel when they express themselves to the point that they won't. And I think there is like a dance there because someone listening to this is like, oh, fuck. Like, so if I do express myself, then like I do have to be responsible for how this person feels.
Sure.
I think you're responsible for the tone in which you deliver things
100%.
and your energy in doing it. You can be direct and straightforward and still be loving and tell the truth. You can also share that exact same message and come across as belittling and abrasive. So I think for somebody listening to this, it's like you aren't responsible for how somebody feels. You're responsible for how you communicate it and then the curiosity. Because I could see somebody getting like hung up on that, especially when you already struggle to express yourself. But coming back to this conversation of reputation, I think a lot of people go through life and they are not conscious of the reputation they're building. And with most things in life, we don't become aware of something until maybe there's a cost. We realize that showing up in a certain way is like leading to a specific outcome. And we don't like it. You know, maybe somebody perceives us to be flaky, inconsistent, dishonest. I don't trust that person. You hear about something through the grapevine that somebody said about you, and then you check yourself, and it's like, I didn't realize, maybe to the extent that I was showing up that way. I think a lot of people don't consciously wake up in the morning and be like, how am I building my reputation and how I show up in the world?
It's a practice, right? I think the foundation and the first step to all of it is like people are unclear on what they value and what they stand for. When you are unclear on what it is that you truly value, what that looks like to you, and what yes and no looks like in your life, it's really hard to build a reputation. You will be all over the place and not even realize that you're being all over the place. A lot of people, I had the conversation with a friend of mine once, and I'm like, we were talking about brand and reputation, and I was like, so what is it that you value? If you're telling me you want to improve your reputation, and people will just make blanket statements. They're like, oh, I value being kind. I'm like, okay, cool. Why do you stand for that? There's just like no answer. And it's like, if you have values, right? And I think if you ask the average person and what their values are, they can actually probably tell you. If you kind of break down what that looks like. If you don't know what you stand for and why, it becomes exceedingly hard to determine how you want to move forward and build a reputation. Because, for example, and like, again, everybody's different. If you are, politics is the easiest place to see this. If you want to create a political side, be pro or anti whatever, if you are not clear why you value it and your ability to stand there and explain why you are on the side of the fence that you are on, politics is the easiest place to get ripped apart in. And even when you are able to be clear on where you stand, you also have to understand how to have a conversation around what you stand for. And I think that's something people get challenged with too. So it's values, but what do you stand for? And like, why do you stand for it? Why does that actually matter to you? Because if you don't understand why, nothing else really matters. When things get difficult, you don't know how to continue. You're unsure of why you're even doing something, for lack of a better term.
I'm sure for a lot of people, and I experienced this, there was things that I wasn't consciously aware of
Sure.
that I valued, but I lived them
Sure.
in the positives. Like we'll put
Yeah.
them in the plus column, right? How you showed up, how I made decisions, how I carried myself and operated. But if you would have asked me to put that on a piece of paper, I wouldn't have been able to tell
Yeah.
you, but the behavior mapped to one thing. I think a lot of people do not have a role model or a reference point in their
Yep.
life for what to value.
Mm-hmm.
If you grow up in an environment where nobody talks about personal growth, they don't talk about how to develop yourself, that is not a part of the conversation. You're not in an environment that like supports that and like actively looks to cultivate it. You might not even have words to describe what it is that you want to create for yourself. So when you ask somebody like, what do you value? I don't know. Holy fuck. That's a super intense conversation because like you don't even have a reference point to how to go about living your life. And as somebody who's experienced that at different points, it's overwhelming. So if somebody is there and like we're starting at the point of like, know what you value, why you value that, or like why you believe those things, where can somebody start if you have no reference whatsoever? And this is their reference, hearing this conversation.
So I think part of it for a lot of people is if I'm to sit there and look at my current behaviors and start asking why do I behave this way, in this situation, and that way in another situation, I give myself the opportunity to get curious. So that's the first part. And to compound on that curiosity, part of what you can do, which will make the biggest difference in the world, is we all have or can find somebody that we can connect with and be like, hey, I need your perspective on something. And even if that person doesn't know you all the way, but they have enough reference point, like they've met you, they've talked to you, they have some sort of inkling of who you are, being able to go to them and ask them, like, based on how you perceive me, is this true to you? And if they say yes, understand why they say yes. And if they say no, rather than taking it as like, oh, like they probably just don't know me, ask why. So there's a huge opportunity in those moments where it's like, hey, I've never done this before. What the fuck do I do? Fine. And I think this is the part with relationships a lot of people fail on. We have a tendency to try to build great relationships with many people. And the reality is you're going to go through life and find out that you're on less than two hands going to be able to count the number of people. I'd say in most cases, one hand. The people that are like, you're going to get this so brutally honest and they're going to ride through every single fire with you, that I can trust that person's gear. When you're early and you don't know what that looks like, the best thing you can do is survey the people you have, whether or not you know how close they are, doesn't matter. And can you listen to what they say and get feedback on, do they say or believe that it's yes, or do they say or believe that it's actually no? And why do they believe that? And not take it as like a personal attack. So like example, if I came to you and you kind of know me and I'm like, hey, I noticed like that, how do you perceive the way I behave? And then you say, okay, I think this is what I value. Do you see that too? If you say no to me, even if it hurts for me to hear that, it's my opportunity to say, what makes you say no? I'm curious. Mm-hmm. The part with all of this when it comes to reputation and figuring out who you want to be, for most people, from a branding standpoint, reputation standpoint, it's the lack of curiosity and willing to listen without getting attached to the fact that someone gave you an answer you liked or gave you an answer that you disliked. And that's where I think for a lot of people, there's an opportunity. Even when you start, it's like, once you've done this for a while, you'll be able to do it without so much resentment or frustration or whatever. Yet when you start, the most uncomfortable thing is to ask and be okay with the fact that even if someone doesn't know you, and I actually think this is a really good example, even if someone doesn't know you really, really well, but they don't perceive you to be who you say you are, that gives you the perfect opportunity to start to think about, what does this actually look like? Which would be kind of like the second big thing in all this is like, what behaviors are reflective of those values? I think a lot of people, like, they can probably, once they can identify what their values are and what they stand for, I think a lot of people don't really think about what the behaviors say about what they tell you that they value. And if I'm being honest, when we think about this through the lens of behavior, like literally the word is be inside of it, you have to be what you say you are. That is what develops your reputation. And for all of us, we perceive things through whatever lens we are. So I'll give you an example from personal anecdote. In my relationship with you, there is no lack of, I'm sure at this point particularly, there's no lack of awareness that I have a strong personality. It is not, and again, you can appreciate this in hindsight. Now, I am either an asshole, and that's what some people will say, or I'm like the most loving person you've ever met. One or the other. Both things can be true. And when you can learn to appreciate those things and see that there's a duality to it, depending on context, you can roll with the punches and accept more of, hey, if someone sees me in this context, cool. They might think I'm coming off strong, and that's cool. And understand that there's like a dance to both sides of a behavior or a perception for that matter.
I will share because I struggled with this. And I hear it a lot, like connecting with clients, team, different things like that. I'm somebody who's very much like rubber meets the road, and like concept is cool to me, but I need examples and I need to be able to like tangibly see it. And so when somebody's listening to this, it's like, okay, your reputation is built on what you value and basically how you live those values. So you tell somebody, I value loyalty, but then you behave in ways that suggest that you are a dishonest and disloyal person. There's going to be conflict there. That is going to wreck your reputation over time. You say that you value honesty, but when you are asked a straightforward question, you lie. Not even omit the truth. Like you just
100%.
Straight up, I'm not going to own
Or
this.
if you're offered honesty, someone gives you a transparent version of their perception of you, you get defensive, you get in denial, you don't consider it.
Yeah. So if your values are like the foundation of a house, we'll say that like these are the foundations. How you live them then becomes the walls that start to go up. We can sit here and say that I value growth. I value honesty. I value love. And depending on where somebody is at in their journey, it's like, okay, well, what do your behaviors look like that demonstrate those things? They might be so disconnected from that, they don't even know how to begin applying that to their life.
Yeah.
And it would be incredibly difficult to, it's like, okay, I love this. This is really amazing information. I want to take it and apply it. But like, how does rubber meet the road? Because they have no reference for how to do this. So either give tangible steps for somebody to identify that. So it's not just like this concept, like pie in the sky. Like how does somebody, I value, let's use like workplace as an example. It's like you value honesty. Let's use that. How does somebody say, I value honesty. This is what my behaviors need to look like to demonstrate this.
Super easy. And you can do this with people who you don't even know. This is a really easy one. I actually suggest this because I think it's a good thing. Go to somebody you don't know or anybody who has a job. And same thing in a relationship. Just go ask them, what would be an example of honesty showing up in this aspect of your life? This goes for workplace. This goes for relationships. This goes for significant others. Like this goes in for every one of them. I'll actually tell you what I've done personally. And I was taught this and it was the best thing. Before I got into my relationship with my now wife, one of the best things a mentor of mine said is he's like, just go to people and ask them the value that you're like sure of, or like the thing you value. Ask them what it looks like to them, and ask a lot of people and see what patterns or consistencies you can find, because your expression of what love looks like and her expression of what love looks like and my best friend's expression of what love looks like, it can be very different. If I get more reference point on what it looks like in someone else's perception, I can start to find the commonalities of, love to the average person's perception is this. What does that mean to me? So if this is what you think, this is what this person thinks, okay, what is my opportunity? Like, what do I think? What does love look like to me when someone gives it to me? Now you have dual. You have internal, which is always the best place to start, which is within. So do this with yourself. What does that look like to me? What does love look like to me? And then go to other people and ask, what does love look like to them? What love looks like to you may not be what love looks like to me. Part of it is learning that is going to be part of this. So the question then becomes, how do you become consistent with being able to show someone that you love them, even if the way they receive or consume or understand love is not the same way as you? And the conversation becomes, you practice. You do not get to learn this. There's no book. Nobody's hand. I can give you like all of this stuff, and I can tell you this from personal experience. You will still fuck it up. I did. Everybody does. You learn. It's part of your learning curve. And so whatever your values are, ask people what it looks like to them. On top of, and first and foremost, what does that look like to you? If you value love and someone came to you and asked you, for example, say, okay, you're telling me your values love. What does that look like to you? What are actions, behaviors, things either you've experienced or want to experience that say, hey, I'm loved?
Willingness to show up, have conversations. I don't think that life is perfect or people are perfect. So a willingness to show up, have those conversations, and work through instead of bow out.
Give me an example of how that worked out for you and how that didn't work out for you at the same time.
What do you mean by how it didn't work
So
out?
you're
Like in
like,
a different dynamic?
Yeah, so like you're saying, oh, like show up for love. Look to you looks like showing up and working through something. Okay, what is an example you have as a life experience where it worked out? Like love was shown the way you're describing to me, and then an example of an experience where they didn't show up. I'm sure you can tell me what those experiences are.
Yeah.
And the beauty of what I just said is it's the additional question, which is not just what does it mean? What does it look like? So you told me what it means. Okay, it means showing up. What does that look like in experience? People are going to tell you based on their experience what it looks like for them. That helps you understand what that looks like, not only for them, but for yourself, because you'll be able to determine it very quickly.
Yeah. Our relationships, literally a conversation we had an hour ago, is an example of you express something, I ask questions about it, where like I fell short of who I want to be in my relationship with you. And in my expression of that, you didn't be like, okay, we're done. Like, I'm firing you as a business partner.
Yes, the catastrophizing or whatever.
And, you know, throwing this to the wind. It's like, you listened, I expressed, I now have an opportunity to walk out of that conversation and like improve and work towards. So I would say that's an act of like love, showing up in a moment where it matters and leaning in instead of leaning out with somebody. A time where that didn't happen, this is going to get like super like murky in my head, because I'm sure I've had relationships with people before where it's like, hey, I would like to talk about this thing that has come up. And the reaction was explosive. This is on you. This has nothing to do with me. And like, there's just no openness or willingness whatsoever. That would be a time that like we were not congruent in showing up with what that looked like. But the part that is murky to me, it's like, yes, but then you weren't loving yourself because you chose to be in this relationship with this person.
Sure, it's also...
And like, we don't need to go down that rabbit hole, but...
I also think it gives you an indicator of what you're looking for, though, right? Like, you can always go downstream and go deeper to understand, like, hey, this is what it is. And it's like, okay, it didn't work out that way. There are a multitude of lessons that you learn, right? And I think that's the beauty of it, is like when you look at, okay, what does that look like in practice? When you know what you don't want it to look like, you can much more quickly identify, hey, this isn't for me. Hey, I've learned from experience that this, and this can't be true. Also, none of us live by one value.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I would say it's a host of things that come back to, let's say, 3 to 5 words for the average person. And so it's not just taking it for one word. You do this with a multitude of words. So if my values, for example, are honesty, willingness, love, like, let's just use those as 3, I can give you a multitude of experiences of what it looks like and explain, this is what it is from a love standpoint. This is what kindness in this context means to me. This is what honesty looks like to me. right? Once you've identified your values and you're looking for the behaviors, map out why each of those things are. And when you ask someone, it's like, it's easy to tell, hey, when you say you value love, honesty, and kindness, or love, honesty, and willingness, you're telling me in this experience that the willingness to have the conversation was equally an act of love, and they didn't hide the truth from you, so that's honest. So it's like you piece all of the behaviors, and what it does is it helps you start to understand that, like, oh, living my values is a string of actions and how they reflect and how they show up, right? And as you do this, what you find is, for a lot of people, and it's the big, I think the big thing that kills reputation is our understanding of what we value and then what the behaviors look like in conjunction or in harmony in practice. We don't spend the time paying attention to or becoming attuned to what that is for us. And therefore we will act inconsistently depending on how we feel. And when it comes to reputation, by being inconsistent with what we say we value and what those behaviors look like, when we're inconsistent, it doesn't develop trust. Trust is the biggest part of reputation. So if my desire is for you to understand that I value willingness, love, kindness, honesty, let's use those four for example, and in every interaction, I don't break down or show or demonstrate what that means to me in the context of that in some capacity by being clear on yes and no, over time, you're like, damn, this person is not loving. I can appreciate fully if I look at something a certain way and you see it differently, and we can have a conversation around, you see that as honesty or as kindness, I see that as being mean. Cool. Let's have a conversation about why we see this differently. But you won't be able to have a healthy version of that conversation until you're clear on what that looks like for yourself and equally with other people. And so, and I even think this to be true, to sidebar, but I said this to you a little bit ago. I also think it's why a lot of people don't have healthy relationships with significant others. I've seen two things play out. I've seen people wake up one morning and be like, how did I end up with this person? And I've also seen the other side of it where it's like they will hold on and hold on and hold on until it just explodes. And then they say things that just they can't come back from for whatever reason, right? And I don't think anything, you can't come back from anything, but I understand the sentiment that comes with that. And a lot of it has to do with we don't take the time to go inward and really dig through and sense and understand, what does this actually look like to me? What is the practice of building this reputation that I'm looking to build? People don't practice that. And I think I think that's something that has to start at a very young age, is teaching kids especially, like, it's okay to make mistakes. We're human, be curious, and like, here are the things for you to learn along the way. You don't have to like beat it into the child or use force or aggressive tactics, yet learning how to communicate that with them, I think, is where a lot of people go wrong.
Well, I guess it's kind of like a statement and then a question.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we try to compartmentalize how we live.
Yes.
So what do you value in your career or in the workplace?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I value growth, contribution, service. Like, let's just use like company core values, right?
Course.
That somebody says, here's what we stand for. This is our mission. This is what our brand is about. This is what we say we value as a company. People try to compartmentalize. This is what I value in a career and in work. This is what I value in a relationship, or these are my values in a relationship. And then these are my values for like my health or my family. And you have like 4 categories of life that all have, I don't want to say at times conflicting information, because like, I'm sure if you stripped it down, it was like, okay, like these apply across all areas. But we distort that and we compartmentalize. And then we end up at odds with ourselves because you're not, you value this, but it's not showing up in all of these areas of your life.
Yes.
And you justify it because, well, it's my career, or it's the business, or it is this. Thoughts and opinions about that?
I find, I've said this to you off air, I find we do not learn how to integrate in our lives. So one thing that always I learned very quickly, I would talk to different people. I'm like, interesting. This person made a lot of money, but isn't happy in family life. This person has an incredible family life, but does decent financially, but nothing you'd be like, wow, that's a ton of money. This family or these people, great with money, great with family life. And then the other end where it's like, not good with family, not good with money. So much is fucking going on. This is terrifying to me. And one of the things you learn is we do a really shitty job at being okay with the idea that we have to critically think and create context on what the pieces of the puzzle look like and accept that it looks different in different stages of life. So I'll give you an example. A 24-year-old guy with no kids, no responsibilities, and wants to develop themselves as an individual and as a man may over-index on working, building career, becoming a business owner, developing skills, whatever. A 35-year-old man with a wife and 2 kids may look at their relationship dynamics, may look at their work a little bit differently. It doesn't mean that they both don't value the same things. It just may mean it looks different in the context of where they're at, especially when like the 35-year-old has 2 little kids. Cool, you may want to spend more time at home. You may want to create flexibility. We're really good at creating finite things in our life. We're like, oh, it's this. X equals Y. Y equals Z. We are not good at creating context. And one of the things that I think for anybody listening is like, when you think about your life and your values and what you stand for, what the behaviors look like, can you create room for context? And you will find, a good mentor of mine said this a long time ago. He's like, you can have it all. You just can't have it all at once. And I think what I learned when he said that was, it's not that you can't, people are like, oh, you can't have everything. I don't think it's that you can't have everything. I think it's you have to learn and develop what we've talked about in previous episode, which is the skills to have the capacity to welcome the responsibility of having everything. Because to have, quote unquote, everything, there are levels of responsibility that come at an individual level, at a personal level, at an emotional level that not everybody takes the time to develop the capacity for. When I say that, I don't mean that we are incapable. It's just, think of it this way. The person who has a healthy family life, the person who has great financial and career success, and also at the same time has their health, there's a level of structure and there's a level of things and behaviors that have to be true for that person. And I'll paint this picture for anybody listening. There has to be a level of systems in place that allow them to be jacked and in shape. So it's not like you can't work out and not eat healthy. That's dumb. Foolish to believe that. You're going to have to work. And family and relationships and friends and people you love takes a level of commitment because you want to be able to build those relationships. I can tell you from things that I've watched and learned, and as I continue to figure out this for myself, in order for me to develop the relationship aspect of it, I've learned that I have to make it simple. I'm not interested in having 1,500 friends. I've got like 3 or 4 people that I'm serious about. We're going to build this motherfucker, and great. Not that the other people don't matter and I can't catch up with you, but like I got like my wife and then like a few other people. Like there's the people I see where they're like, oh, this weekend I went to Cabo with 25 of my friends from high school, and next weekend they went to Cancun with 25 friends from college. You don't fucking know those people. You are fucking lying to yourself. And it's the same thing with gym. It's like you have to take some time to build the muscle, but it doesn't take that or get in shape and get healthy. But like personal experience, busiest work period of my life in the last 2 years, I exercise 4 days a week. I look the best. I am the healthiest. I've lost the most weight I ever have with the most amount of ease. Doing the least I have. It's ironic, isn't it? Learning how to be effective. Same thing with business. It's like I've needed to pour more in because there are skills and systems that I need to develop. So it's like you're not going to have it all at once. You have to learn how to create the systems that support having it all. And so when you say what you did, I think it's a matter of learning to create context on what it looks like and being okay that might actually mean less in certain ways. And what I mean by that is you can have a lot of money. You don't need 30 businesses to make that money.
Yeah.
Or 20 different jobs. You can want meaningful and great friendships. You might hang with the same 4 or 5 people for a long, long time and the majority of your rest of your life when you want meaningful connection. And that's awesome. And same thing with your health. It's like you could probably be pretty elite at this, and it might not need to be this extreme, like I have to be in the gym 3 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like it might just not have to be like that. And I think that's the thing people struggle with, is creating context, but it's a skill issue.
I'm going to take this a different direction.
Go ahead.
Kind of. We talk about values. We talk about living them. What do those behaviors look like?
Yeah.
Talk about integrating it into your life. It matters. Yes, to build your reputation. Yes, because you want people to trust you and you want that level of consistency. I think that reputation can open doors in your life that money can't.
Yep.
It creates opportunities that like are so far beyond your wildest dreams based on how people associate with you and like speak about you in your absence. And you can't buy that.
Nope.
You can only earn it. And you can only earn it by developing yourself and how you show up and being consistent with what you value. So I think for somebody who's listening to this, it's like, well, why does that matter? Or like, what is the upside of being so deeply committed to my values and what that looks like and how I show up in this world? It's like, it will quite literally open up doors for you that you can't get in otherwise.
Nope.
Opportunities, what maybe seems like luck at times. And it's just this like string of like behaviors and moments and interactions with somebody. And it's almost like this little golden path. It's like little golden bricks get laid out in front of you. But like every single brick you lay down is being congruent with who you say you are and like working on yourself and building that reputation.
There is more opportunity in depth than there is width. And it takes many people a long time to understand that.
Question. Was there ever a time in your life that you had a poor reputation?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I don't want to say, I'll call it what it is. I'd probably call it a lot worse than it was. Let's put it that way. I think what I realized was I had a period in my life probably from, when did my mom get sick? December of 2014 until probably December of 2014 till, let's call it, December of 2017. That was a very clear 3-year window where, as I was learning how to develop as a man, and I think also in 2014 I was 21. My brain didn't fully develop till 25. So I always tell people, like, there's a little bit more grace until 25 as a guy. After that, there's none. Sorry, you're fucked. The day you hit 25, I'm done giving you grace. Fuck you. Kindly. There was a lot of oscillating and a lot of learning around, I don't need to swing to extremes of softness and like be almost like a pushover. And I also don't need to be this rugged asshole at times too, right? And I think part of it was coping and not learning or not realizing how much of an influence and understanding that my upbringing in childhood had, and then being able to appreciate, reconcile, and love through that. There was a journey within that. There's also periods of loneliness and isolation within that I think were very healthy for me. And I also think for people listening, if you ever go through a period of your life where you feel lonely, it's actually an indicator for you to spend time alone. I think one of the best things that offer us like true wisdom and insight on life is introspection. Not thinking too highly of ourselves, but also understanding like the role we play in the world we're in. So that period of my life taught me, like certain things that I had went through, it taught me that there is a multifaceted way to look at everything. And there is a multitude of truths in any situation. And the question becomes, how do you want to show up? And even when you're wrong, can you do it with kindness and grace and humility? And when you're right about something, can you do it with kindness, grace, and humility? I'll read this. I know you don't like me on my phone, so I'm going to give us a caveat that this is something that I posted. There's a thing that I wrote a long time ago, and I posted it on my story. yesterday, and it's something that I wrote and I went back and forth with my cousin on, but it reminds me of this conversation. There's as time passes, there is this constant and beautiful reminder of the simple idea that the majority of the people will live their life in an identity of what should or should not be. To no surprise, this is where pride will reside, leading to the limitation of people being able to see the beauty of what is. Pride is often a form of indignant perception, one which is ingrained in rightness rather than happiness and even righteousness. Pride provides a wall which shelters us and maintains our self-limitations, so our self-identification in and around our beingness. And I won't read the whole thing, but the reason I share that is in that journey of being able to accept and reconcile who you are, part of that is letting go of your need to be right and be correct. And equally, the other part of it is being okay with you're not perfect and that it's okay to be wrong. You can at any point raise your hand and say, I'd like to change my answer. And I find that many of us get stuck in the pride of, oh, I was right. Oh, I did this. I created that. None of the gifts that you have as a person are yours. They come through you. If I'm being a little woo-woo for anybody, welcome. The ability to welcome that and not take it for granted and live through a lens of gratitude of it is my responsibility to share who I am with the world. That is something that I was deeply ingrained in that period because I didn't like who I was. And equally, I would look and I'd have conversations with people and they're like, you're not nearly as bad as you try to paint yourself out to be. So why are you doing that? And I was like, interesting. We are often our biggest critics and we always will be. And it doesn't serve the purpose of the man I want to become by being like fixating on it. Nor does it serve that same person to be like, I was right. See? What I tell you, I called the behavior before it came out. It doesn't do you any good. Mm-hmm. So I there was a period, and it's not that there aren't moments where you may question. You also find as you develop, you don't really question. There starts to become this trust that it's going to play how it's meant to, and practicing and being the person and running towards what that looks like for you. That's the only thing you can put your energy and focus on. So, what about for you?
Of course. Of course.
Of course.
How can you
Where
not?
were you yesterday? She's like, were you here?
Of course there has been. Probably at different points in my life for various things. When I was younger, for sure, the reputation of me in my hometown and in my whole high school growing up was I was aggressive, probably not safe, like at like multiple levels of, parents had an opinion of me, kids had an opinion of me, other adults had an opinion of me. Like I definitely had a reputation and it wasn't a good one. What I found interesting at that point in my life was I was so committed to just running my life into the ground that I didn't have much grace or openness to even hear somebody's opinion about me because I was just so committed to being misunderstood that could have cared less at that point, like what my reputation was, until I kind of like had my own crossroads moment of like, I care for me, that how I'm showing up in the world. So of course, I think everybody goes through it. I think when I look back in hindsight and through different conversations, and I've had times in business where I felt like, again, probably more hard on myself than what somebody else would say. But I've had times in business where I haven't liked our reputation of how I showed up as a leader, how maybe clients and customers experienced us, people who, dealt with, like, were a part of the team at various points. That was incredibly challenging to go through. And I will speak from like a different place for that for somebody who maybe is listening to this and they're like, I don't like my reputation. And there is like a lot of area of improvement there for me. I think when you become aware that how people perceive you and your reputation isn't what you want it to be, it can be very crippling when you first become aware of it. because you want to fix it. You're overwhelmed by what feels like an immeasurable amount of work that you have to do to swing and like bring it back into the opposite direction. It can also be really lonely because I think once you are aware that it like, hey, I don't like people's perception of me and how I've shown up, there's just this level of like humiliation that you experience. And as somebody who's personally gone through it, I think that has been one of the most challenging things I've ever experienced in life is my perception of what my reputation is based on a handful of things, and then having to rectify that and change your reputation while simultaneously being okay with the fact that some people's reference of you for the rest of your fucking life is going to be that. And that will never go away. And I think that can feel incredibly overwhelming when you first start going through it. And there will come a point that it settles and you understand. It was like, this is part of your journey and evolution. But it's so true. Like there's people still to this day, I'm sure that like when they think of me and their last interaction with me, it's like you have an opinion about me based on the time and the season of my life in which you met me and how you interacted. And it doesn't matter how much work I do in one direction. Like I will forever be this person to you. And I think when you can get to a point that you're okay with that, because you are committed to doing your own work and improving yourself and like what you value and living those values, it becomes much easier to navigate.
I think when you can own it before anybody else can tell you, there's a lot of freedom in that too. I think that was a early distinction that like freed me. I do remember I like put it together. I'm like, man, if I just own the fact that I suck and like where I fall short, it's like, I don't even remember what had happened at the time, but I started like practicing that. And like, the more someone would criticize me, the less it would sting. And it would just so interesting to me. It's like, yeah, I'm an asshole. But yeah, I get where you're coming from. I'm not here to deny your experience. I'm open to discussing it with you, but like if that all you've got for me is this, like I can't, and some people don't want to, and that's how the world works. It's not, and that's part of the lesson you learn is like not everybody's interested.
The most freeing moments in my life, hands down, have been when I have fallen short and I have had conversations with people where I've taken like full ownership of it and didn't need them to change their opinion about me.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm doing this because it is the right thing to do based on who I want to be. And like, I am here to have this conversation, and I might walk away from it and this conversation changes like nothing for you, but I'm here out of like genuine, like love in having
100%.
those are the most like freeing moments of my life. And I learn most things trial by fire. So I've had a lot of those fucking conversations.
It's okay. We all learn how we do.
And they get easier over time.
And I think part of what you learn is like it doesn't have to be as much trial by fire. It can be more of I can just read the manual or like ask a few questions and avoid completely missing what the aim was. I think that's another thing you learn too is like part of it is trial by fire for sure. I think you have to develop skills, and a lot of people don't think through how they're approaching things. And that becomes their biggest limiter. It's like, because if you think about it, it's like, okay, if I keep trial by firing, at some point the question from the other side becomes, when are you going to change how you're approaching this? Because we keep ending up in the same situation. So I think it's learning to the dance of both. It's like, yes, do the thing and learn how to think through the approach, and also be okay with you're not going to be, just like you're not going to be good at perfect at executing, you're not going to be perfect with thinking either.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I'll end with this. And it applies in business, career, and personal. Kind of coming back to what we said earlier. Your reputation will open up doors for you, and it will also close doors that you...
Just as quickly.
It's like this invisible force and hand in your life, and you can't see it. And at times, feels like everything you touch turns to gold, and opportunities come up, and people are talking about you, and you're getting all these wins, and all these amazing things are happening around you. And it's almost when you're experiencing that, and I think everybody has at some point in their life where it's like you just hit flow state almost, and everything is just teeing up green light after green light. when you dissect that and you look at it objectively, a lot of what got you into all of those opportunities and situations was your character and how you treated people and how you treated this one person one time and you showed up and you were congruent, and how it like interconnected to like 20 different things. It is so powerful. The same is also true when doors keep just slamming and you're trying what you perceive to be as like incredibly committed to like what it is you're looking to build, and it's just difficult. It's no after no after no. Opportunities aren't lining up. Things are falling through. And again, it's like this invisible force in your life. And you can reflect back and you can look, oh, in this conversation, in this moment, and in this interaction, this was also connected to 5 to 10 different things. So yes, some of the conversation might have sounded a little bit woo, but what do you value? What does living those values look like? And there's great reward for doing so. Not even just in terms of like career and business and like financial gain and opportunity, but relationships and friendships and connection and just different experiences you get to have in the world. I'm sure that there's been many experiences in your life and in other people's where you would have never got into that restaurant and got that reservation, had your reputation of how you show up as an individual been connected to somebody 6 months back. Everything has like an equal and opposite reaction. And it's inspiring to develop yourself and your reputation. It takes forever to build. And a couple really terrible decisions to just tank it into the fucking floor.
It can be as little as one. So, yeah, I agree. Cool. Like and subscribe and leave a review and all of the same things every other podcaster tells you. I'm just going to tell you now. So if you don't do this, then stop watching.